Okay, everybody, thank you for attending today's webinar featuring the CIF's directors and focusing on a return to work. It's been a long month and there's a huge amount of preparation after going into getting sites ready, getting companies ready, getting employees ready and getting ourselves ready to return to work. There's a huge amount of work after being carried out by the people on this call, the CIF directors and their staff. So we thought it would be timely to just give members and non-members a quick run through on the key things that they should be doing over the weekend and in the coming weeks to prepare to return to work. So look, we will have a full agenda. We have a couple of directors to get through. The format is I'll introduce Tom Parlin now, our Director General, who can talk to you for a while about the steps that have been taken and what to do in preparation. And then I'm going to ask each individual director to give you a couple of minutes of their view of what you can do to prepare to return to sites. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with a couple of questions. So fire in questions via text. And we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. It's unlikely we'll get to all of them, so any specific queries can be directed towards the director. You can find our contacts on the website, and you have numbers and emails there. So we do want to hear your questions and want to help, as we have been over the last month, but we might be able to get around to them all today in the webinar. So we should be done in about an hour or so. So I'll just hand over now to Tom Parlin, Director General, to kick off.
Thanks, Shane, and good afternoon, folks. I suppose hopefully it's a good day, and it's an exciting day since the 27th of March when the CIF announced the total lockdown of the industry. We've been off our sites. I suppose as an organisation, I have to commend my colleagues in the CIF for having sort of got stuck in. We immediately knew that before we could get back to work, we'd have to have a very comprehensive standard operating procedure that would have to convince our workforce that construction sites were going to be a safe place to come back to work, and convince society as well. A lot of work has gone in there, a lot of work by our own executives and by our directors, but a lot of work by members as well in terms of their involvement in the different committees, particularly in the Health and Safety Committee and the IR Committee and so on. I've been involved myself representing the Construction Industry Federation on LEAF, which is the forum where government engage with employers and unions, and that's been very worthwhile, and we've had intensive negotiations and big discussions with government. It's just represented the CIF, IBEC, ICTU, and the chambers. So it's just 4 individuals. We've had numerous meetings with the Taoiseach, with the Minister of Finance, Minister for Jobs, and their officials, and eventually it resulted in the return to work safely protocol. That is very much along the lines of our own standard operating procedures. We've had to do some minor modifications to our own last weekend to fall in line with the national protocol. But the national protocol is about getting every sector of the industry back to work safely. And it does obviously go very strongly into the fact that COVID is still a serious threat to individuals. The notion that it's all past us, is a dangerous one. I know the Chief Medical Officer has outlined that, but we do appear to be getting the better of it. But a small percentage of the national population have contracted COVID, and that leaves the rest of the population very, very exposed to that. So when we get back to work, it's imperative that it works and that we go back safely, that we have confidence, that we give confidence to our workforce, we give confidence to their families and to the communities that they will be working in. I'm confident that the steps we've taken and that the protocol that's put together collaboratively with government, with the unions and with other employers, that is a good document, that it represents the very best in world-class protection. And I know that all of our members, and I've been on Zoom calls with a large number of our members through branch meetings, that they're all very determined that the sites that we open up next week will be safe sites for our workers and will be run well. We do and will have the worry into the future that the viability of those jobs and sites will be at stake, and there's no question the COVID new regulations are going to add substantially to the cost and we know that we're heading into a substantial global recession. So all very challenging. On the other hand, we know that nationally, our government and hopefully our future government are going to invest substantially and borrow for a stimulus package. And thankfully, the construction sector is in the right place for this, because we need lots of infrastructure, and some of the competing elements of society won't be in a position to open up as quick as we are. So I keep my fingers crossed that the government will give the final approval this evening for construction to start up on Monday. And I look forward to a successful start without any incident, and that our workers will come in, voluntarily, and will go home safely every day, and that it will work well. So thanks again for everyone's support during the period. And any of you that aren't CIF members out there, I'd implore you, if you're involved in construction, to join up and pay the subs, because we'll have the same challenges ourselves as every other individual company will have in terms of keeping our road show on the road. So thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. A very good overview. And I think it's a testament to our workers that over 114,000 have completed the online induction. It shows the commitment to safety, but the commitment to going back to work as well. So I'm going to move on quickly to talk to Dermot Carey, who is Director of Safety in CIF and has been hugely instrumental, in designing the standard operating procedure that we're now all operating to.
Thanks, Shane. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I just maybe want to run through a couple of points that are relevant as we run up to the industry reopening on May the 18th. And obviously there's a lot of work being done to prepare for that. I have a couple of points here that I believe are important, the kind of key 5 points. I just do want to echo what Tom said there, though, in relation to thanking the members of the Safety Committee who put in a huge amount of effort to draw up the standard operating procedure. These were busy people who have another job, who gave up their time generously, and I'd like to thank them for that. But as we ramp up for a return to work, and I believe it'll be a phased return to work next week, there are a couple of things that I believe that companies need to do. And at the top of the list, I think, is to review your documentation. Within the SOP, we clearly outline some of the actions that are required, such as a reconsideration of health and safety plans on site in the context of COVID-19, and also a review of safety statements, and obviously that goes to subcontractors as well. So I would presume that an awful lot of that work has already been done, and in preparation for a return, that they're prepared and all being approved. I would like to highlight also, Tom mentioned the National Protocol for Return to Work that was published last Saturday. We have updated our standard operating procedure in line with the National Protocol. There's very little difference, but if you're still using the old one, you should visit the CIF website and download the new one. There are some key issues that you need to be aware of, such as the lead employee representative, and we've given some guidance in relation to that. A minor change in relation to things like the return to work declaration form, slightly changed. And obviously there's a big emphasis on the National Protocol on engagement with workers. So, but I'd suggest that you visit the CIF website, download version 2, and look at the control page, document control page. It'll outline some of the changes that are within the document, not that many. Moving on then to the other point that I'd like to raise is just to ensure that all your workers have completed the CIF induction, online induction. This is a very simple process. Simply log on to our website, give some basic information, your name, either an email address or a telephone number, go through the information that's on the induction. The induction is very straightforward. It's basic information. I believe we were ahead of the game there, in that the information that's on the induction is what's called for under the National Protocol anyway. And on successful completion, all workers will get a digital card, either emailed to them or texted them, depending on what they opted for. That has their picture, it has their name, it has a unique number and a QR code, which will allow for the cards to be checked. It might be useful also at this point for members to review how you check cards. It's very simple. Again, visit our website and it'll explain how you can check cards. We've also sent out notices now to those 120,000 people who have completed the course, just to ensure that they have the digital card ready for when they're returning to work. And we suggest that they take a screenshot of it and have it on their phone. Moving on then to the next point that I have, there was a requirement in the SOP for the appointment of a C19 compliance officer, and indeed in the national protocol for a lead employee representative. So those issues should be addressed. Companies should be appointing those people into their positions and also addressing the training that requirement for both. Just to address the issue of training, we're clear within ourselves that we're not suggesting that companies source commercial training for this. Within our CIF training website, ciftraining.ie, under the virtual academy, you'll get a free webinar, just like you see here, that has been recorded outlining the role of the compliance officer. That and in-house instruction on your own arrangements are adequate training. There's no need for external training in relation to this. The other thing that is clearly called for in both SOPs is that those individuals are clearly visible and clearly identifiable. So we're suggesting green vests with a compliance officer or site safety rep on the back would be adequate there. And obviously then looking at site arrangements, and hopefully people are well advanced in those site arrangements for ensuring that there are adequate hygiene facilities, hand washing where possible, and sanitation stations, that there has been alterations or will be made alterations in relation to facilitating social distancing, and that welfare facilities such as canteens, drying rooms have been addressed and altered to allow for the requirements set out in the SOP. And my fifth point is just really feedback that I've had, spoken to a number of contractors who are currently operating under the SOP because they're essential sites. The feedback from them is that key points that members need to be aware of are entry and exit to site, and that's where people bunch up. And so you need to consider that, either stagger entry points or have multiple entry points on your site. Then breaks, at break time, people tend to bunch up. And again, feedback tends to be that that's not because of any malevolence, it's because people just forget and they bunch up naturally. So you need to be reiterating the message of social distancing. So the company I just spoke to before going online here, they suggested that the need for continuous toolbox talks to remind people that social distancing is required. And I suppose the other point that they make to us is that the style of implementation, initially at least, should be coaching people and mentoring people in the rules that are required. I think most people will want to work and will want to work in accordance with the rules, but they'll be unfamiliar with them. Therefore, you need to coach and mentor them. So I suppose, again, with Monday in mind, and I'm conscious of the last week we had before the sites were closed, there'll be inevitably huge public interest in a return to work in the construction sector. So companies need to be aware of that, and they need to ensure that people don't gather out the front, and need to be aware that people will be watching, and you need to be complying with the basic requirements. I suppose a key note that I just want to finish with before I hand it back to Shane is, if it can't be done safely, it shouldn't be done. And that's a key message that we're sending out, that if you can't do it safely and you can't do it in accordance with the standard operation procedures, you need to reconsider what you're doing. And the final point I'd make is that we've had ongoing discussions with the Health and Safety Authority, and they are very conscious that the industry is going back. They want to work with us on this, but we need to help them to ensure that we don't have situations where complaints are being made and the industry comes under pressure. So at that point, I think they're the key 5 points that I just wanted to highlight. I'll hand it back to you, Shane.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks for all the good work. So next I'm going to hand over to Anthony on IR, because our workers are a huge part of returning to work. So, Anthony, what are the key things? What's the key thing employers should do in relation to employees in advance of any return to work?
Yeah, well, I suppose with sites reopening next week, in advance of that, engagement is the big it's the big word. It's the big highlight of what should be done this week. I suppose if all your employees are going back, they should have been told as early as possible. If you're coming back with a staggered workforce, give them as much notice as possible, so that they can put measures in place to get back safely. You would have heard Dermot talking about staggered work breaks. So there's a lot of sites will require staggered working hours, start times, break times, and finish times. I would just say to be mindful of the Organisation of Working Time Act when you are doing that all your employees are getting their breaks in line with the Act. And then just one final thing, and it's a question I'm getting on a daily basis, is in relation to holidays. This isn't just in relation to going back next week, but just in general. And do employees accrue annual leave when they've been on layoff for the last 7-8 weeks? And the answer to that is yes and no. Under the legislation, they don't accrue annual leave while they're on temporary layoff. But then under the Organisation of Working Time Act, any employee who works 1365, so 1,365 hours within the annual leave year, they are entitled to their full entitlement. And that will be the majority of full-time workers. So that's their annual leave, and they are entitled to public holidays for the first 13 weeks of layoff. So that would have been the Easter Monday and Maybank holiday. They're probably the major queries I'm kind of getting over the last few days, Shane.
Excellent, great stuff. Thank you, Anthony. So if anyone has any specific queries, they can direct them towards Anthony through the website. His details are on there. Thanks very much. Okay, we'll move to another area now, and to contracting. We've Paul Sheridan here. Obviously, there's a huge amount of cost involved in a shutdown and then a remobilization, and the remobilization is turning out to be more difficult than the shutdown. But Paul has been monitoring along with Sean the contracts issue and costs and so on. So Paul, you're going to be busy in the next while, yeah?
Thanks, Shane. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's going to be a very challenging time for the construction industry, for all contractors and subcontractors as well. So over the past 8 weeks, before I joined 4 weeks ago, a lot of work has been done by the team in main contracting in terms of providing FAQs. There's a webinar. There's many notes that have gone out dealing with some of the OGP notes that have been released. And most recently, we issued a guidance around remobilization and the importance of a couple of factors that all contractors should consider. And I suppose I'll go through a few of these now, but I suppose the first off is obviously your supply chain is very important. If you are recommencing on Monday, at this stage, you should have engaged with all your subcontractors, your suppliers, and your materials, particularly any subcontractors that may be outside the country that are required to come back in, and be aware of that quarantine period. But as you get into more of the contractual elements of remobilization, you'll have already been aware of the OGP's note around the ex gratia payment. We have released an FAQ on that, and this is something you can consider. There's also health and safety obligations detailed under the contract. And of course, there's a broader element to that as well, but you should be aware as a main contractor, if you are the PSCS, of what your obligations are under that particular role. Like over the next number of months, engagement and cooperation with the EOR or your client is going to be very important, particularly around the implementation of the elements of the CIF's SOP, particularly about assessing the work that you're going to carry out. And as Dermot said, there is a health and safety obligation on a main contractor, and the work you choose to start, recommence, will require a risk assessment, and that assessment not just from health and safety factor, it will feed in then to getting a sense of the overall impact on your construction plan, which you should be discussing with your client in EOR, and how COVID will affect the productivity on site. That should then start giving you the records to build up the basis of the measurement of what costs have developed while you've been implementing the health and safety related restrictions under COVID-19. When you get to that, you're then into looking at the remedies available to you within your contracts. And again, I refer you back to resources on the CIF website and those that we've circulated in terms of building, of the process of building for the unavoidable costs that have been generated through lost productivity. And that will involve looking at the remedies and making the notices, and making the notices in time so that you don't become time barred in any contracts that have a condition precedent on that. It is really important that you do that. And you collect your records and you slowly build up over a period of time as the project progresses in terms of how COVID-19 is continuing to impact. And that means more and more regular meetings with your clients and your EORs and recording of the effects, and therefore allowing you to make effective measurements. We are encouraging all our members, and we're engaging with the likes of the OGP, the DAA, Irish Water, the Department of Education, the OPW, to encourage all parties to collaborate. The Construction Industry Council has called on all parties in the construction sector to collaborate so as to avoid the unnecessary and burdensome costs associated with dealing with disputes. It is a challenging time, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and we'll only start to really see how this is going to affect construction over the foreseeable future once we get going. We will continue to provide as much guidance as we can as things develop, and we encourage you to continue to read the AMCs that are coming from us, and also refer to our website for more detailed information. If you have individual specific queries, please feel free to contact the main contracting and tendering department, and we'll try and address them. I'll hand you back now to Shane. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. Your camera was a bit breaking up there a bit, Paul, but I think we got everything, and thanks for that. Sean Downey is Director in the subcontracting and specialist contracting area, and he's also a big proponent of Construction 4.0 and technology, so he's probably got two hats on. Sean, from those perspectives, what should companies be doing in advance of any return to work?
Thanks, Shane. And just following on from Paul's point there, so I suppose as a unit, really what we've been dealing with is three different phases, and we're about to probably go back into a phase now where there's great uncertainty. And it's really very similar to what was happening from around, St. Patrick's Day up until the 28th, because people knew that there was going to be a potential risk. There was a potential issue coming down. It was very, very difficult for them to actually measure it, to put their finger on it and say exactly what the impact was going to be of COVID-19 as it developed. And we're probably entering back into that phase now again, where people are starting to go back onto sites, and really they're very unsure exactly what the full impact is going to be. So the key thing is this is really going into the third phase now at this stage. So we had the first stage of the initial impact up until the 28th of March before the MP Act and the actual order for shutdown of the industry. From the 28th of March up until now, next Monday, the 18th of May, when the sector will be expecting to remobilise on a phased basis. And then there's going to be from the 18th of May onwards and what that brings. And some of the actions to date and some of the correspondence that we've been sending out, some of the signs coming from the OGP are very positive, and they're also leading us to trying to provide advice to people on how to engage between subcontractor, main contractor, but also on private sector contracts where there may not be something within the contracts that specifically deals with this situation. Irish contracts would traditionally really not cover the issue of force majeure in an event such as this that's outside the control of both parties. But our FAQs so far have tried to give people really good insight into how they can approach the actual contractual position and how they should continue to engage with whether it's their main contractor or their client. The three big things, they've been covered a bit so far, but it's really about engagement and communication, number one. Whether the contract covers this as a risk that gives you time and money or just time, it doesn't matter. At this stage, what we're saying is you've got to engage with, whether it's your main contractor or if you're working as a specialist directly for the client. You've got to engage and you've got to discuss how are operations going to restart? How do you expect us to operate, and what's your realistic expectations in terms of the timeline now for delivery going forward if we're to try and operate within both the SOP from CIF and the national protocol? So what's the impact likely to be, and how can we actually manage operations safely? We've been very, very clear that even if you have really good relationships with main contractors or clients, you've got to look at what your contract demands. And if there are conditions precedent within the contract that say you must serve notices for either extensions of time or for financial compensation related to extra costs because of this event, because of the series of events, because of COVID-19 and the new measures that you've been asked to put into place, then you need to serve the notices. There's no point looking at it in about a month's time and thinking, look, we're collaborating here, we're working effectively, if you have no right to recover any compensation. Even if people would like to negotiate with you, you need to consider serving contractual notices if that's what your contract requires. And we've talked about that since before the 28th of March, when there was a potential risk. We've talked about it since then, and updated notes that were sent out to members telling them that now you need to serve notices because of the fact that the stay-at-home order is in place and there's an actual impact as a result of the ministerial order. And now the fact that you're going to be going back to site, you're going into a different scenario where you may not get an instruction to go back. You may be wondering, are we supposed to start on Monday? And what you really should be doing is you should be seeking confirmation that the project is available for you to restart on Monday. You should be talking to main contractors or clients to see what management plans they have in place to manage the wider operation if you're not the one that's in control of the project. And you should be seeking confirmation that the site is starting on Monday. And on foot of that, you should also be communicating what your plan is to actually manage your operations safely. The third thing then really is getting into the practicalities of actually going back to site. And that's going to obviously deal with a lot of very sophisticated communication and planning mechanisms, as Dermot already set out in terms of health and safety. You've got to look at the SOP, you've got to look at the notifications, the letter that you should be sending out to your staff to make sure that they're okay to restart, that they're actually in a position to restart, that they're not bringing a risk back to site. That's really, really important that those forms are completed by employees in advance. We would also be encouraging people to get people to do the induction, and quite a number, it'll be almost 120,000 maybe at the end of today, have already done that. And that's really, really important as well from the subcontractor's point of view, because if your guys turn up on site on Monday or on Tuesday or on Wednesday, if they're brought back on a phased basis, the last thing you want is a whole queue of them trying to get into the site at the same time, and then trying then to get onto the webinar, to do the webinar, and it not being available because of demand at that point in time. So we'd be encouraging you to get your staff to try and to do that, your subcontractors and suppliers to do that webinar in advance, and trying to do it off peak if they see that there's any blockages in the actual availability of the webinar. You should really already have been back to site, maybe looking at the actual layout of site, if you possibly could have. If not, you and your management team should be the ones that are going back first to consider what type of plan you're going to implement, how your own safety statement is going to be influenced, as Dermot already said, what your operational plan is, and how you're going to have to interact with other subcontractors. Whether it's a subcontractor that's in front of you, or it's someone that's coming after you, or that intermittently comes in the middle of your operations. It's really, really important that you pose those questions, that you make sure that there's alignment between you and other packages. And if you, in terms of the proximity working within 2 meters, if you need specific timelines and you need to have, say, rooms locked out just for your operations during certain periods of time, that you start to communicate that in a formal manner with the main contractor and make sure that there's buy-in with other subcontractor packages. You've got to be looking obviously at your supply chain and as has been mentioned already, there will be a lot of people that have already left the country, maybe gone home to different parts of the UK, mainland Europe, that may not be able to start straight away. They might have to go into quarantine if they're only coming back into the country in the next few days. And that could be a big issue for you being able to comply with requirements on sites. So you've got to look at that in terms of labour demand and material supply, especially for maybe particular commissioning activities where you have specialists that you need to get back on site at very particular times. And then our view would be that you've got to look at how you actually intend to restart. And our view would be that not every single worker should be going back on Monday, but really you should be going back on a phased basis. All projects have the ability to go back, but you really should be looking to go back on a phased basis and on a managed basis to make sure that you're mitigating the risk, that you're dealing with the SOP, and you're making sure that everybody understands what the risks are, and to try and have this behavioural piece, as Dermot had said out there again, you know, that you've constant toolbox talks to make sure that people are not afraid to ask questions, that there's really good communication, that any concerns that are raised are dealt with very, very quickly, and people understand what the reporting mechanisms are on the site, who the COVID-19 compliance officers are, so that there's no concerns that people don't feel at risk when they go back to work. The guidance notes so far have quite comprehensively covered what the contracts say, what people need to actually look at in terms of standard forms of contract, standard forms of subcontract. The webinar was really good that was done by Siobhan Kenny. Now it's some weeks old, and we're looking obviously at updating those on a regular basis to try and give people maybe more insight into what they might be actually considering themselves at any point in time as they're going back. The big piece, as Paul has already set out, is a lot of the contracts don't specifically allow for recovery of time or money, perhaps in some of the risks that people are going to be facing. So it's really, really important that you have good engagement, that you communicate what your issues are, and that you start to allocate, make sure you've got someone responsible for tracking what the issues are and for measuring what the impact is on site. So, for example, you previously would have had 5 or 6 people working in a room, installing trunking or putting up plasterboard or putting up steel partitions, whatever it happens to be. If that's now restricted to 2 people, then you've got to track that. Because whether or not there's going to be a recovery mechanism could still be a question for the contract, could still be a question for a dispute mechanism maybe at some point in the future. But it's absolutely critical that you're tracking the data and that you've got a really good record of what the impact was. There's no point saying, I think I was impacted at some point in the future. You've got to have really good data and really good analysis of showing how it actually impacted your operations and how your production was impacted. If you don't have that data set, you can't enter into a discussion and try and recover, and you'll not be able to go to a dispute mechanism like adjudication or even mediation or conciliation in the future if you don't have a good data set. So that's the key things. I know that members, so far we've had feedback from member groups asking in particular that really appreciate the amount of information that's going out. And again, I would point people towards tracking the all member circulars that go out every evening from CIF and looking at the back to work resource pack. The OGP notes have been quite positive so far. We believe that there are more coming with regard to future negotiations and future collaboration, and Paul and I will keep you updated on that. And we also think that they are a really positive approach to how people, just because that's dealing only with the public sector doesn't mean you can't take the same principles to deal with private sector clients, private sector main contractors, and try and have the same type of approach there. Because the key is clients will want projects to be completed without risk of disruption, and that collaboration and that approach is something that you should be trying to take across into the private sector works as well. That's really it. Okay, thanks, Shane.
Good, Sean. Yeah, very comprehensive, and the key point being collect the data and communicate early to give yourself the best chance of coming out of this. So look, I'm going to move on to James Benson in our planning and development department, director of. He's been doing a lot of work engaging with the Department of Housing and planning and local authorities to make sure that some of the micro issues around the remobilisation of industry occur. So James, any advice for members beginning to look or starting to work, return to work on Monday?
Thanks very much, Shane. I suppose firstly, I just even commend the members themselves for their responsibility and their activities to date over the last number of weeks. Their commitment in getting back to work and offering themselves and putting the right measures and procedures in place to allow for a safe return to work, and indeed the responsibility that they've shown as leaders within the industry in all works going forward. Similarly to others, I'm wearing two hats today on the housing and planning front. And housing, no different than any of the other sectors, is intrinsically linked to planning. And we have seen a number of planning changes within the last, since the commencement of the emergency period. I have 5 key areas or 5 key scenarios I paint today for people to be aware of. First off, keep updated. There's a huge amount of information that's given out from ourselves on a daily basis, and that can be tough to keep on top of. But it is only the information that goes out is most priority information, so you need to keep on top of it. In relation to the Planning and Development Act 2000, there has been an order under that, under Section 251, that looks at an extension of timelines within the Planning and Development Act, building regulations, and other areas within legislation. We have provided 3 very comprehensive notes and explanatory notes of what's actually entailed within those orders, and I'd encourage everyone to familiarise yourselves with the contents of those, and they're available on the member side of the website. Key areas that we have addressed, and Shane alluded to this already, and our ongoing discussions with both the Department and importantly the Department of Housing Planning and Local Government. Working hours, and this will be a key area for all members across all sectors. Along with the requirements of the SOP, there will be requirements for programme of works and looking at people's working hours. We've brought this to the attention of the department and the planning division, and we're aware that there will be a guidance note issued out from the department to the relevant planning authorities in the coming days that will look at a potential mechanism there for extended working hours. Once we are in receipt of this and we have the full contents of the details, we'll make it fully known to all members. I would also draw members' attention to, we had the 3rd extension of the public consultation period within the Planning and Development Act last Saturday, and that is now extended out until the 23rd of June. And again, all implications of that are contained within our own information note. Building regulations is another area that members should be mindful of across all sectors. Part L and Part F are due for commencement on the 31st of December, or sorry, of October of this year. And there's likely to be an extension to this, but this hasn't occurred at this point in time. And we are seeking that extension through the department, and will inform members as of when that does arrive. Second area, I suppose, to people to make them aware, in the residential side of things, to establish your current position and assess your own individual projects. Again, a lot of key information out there that we've provided for you through the SOP, the Residential Sector Back to Work Implementation Framework, the online induction, previous webinar on compliance officer, and on Wednesday we also completed the residential sector remobilisation webinar, and that's now up on the member side of the website, and it goes across beyond just the residential sector. So there's key information within there that I encourage all members to look at in their own efforts and to preparedness before a return to activities. Again, similar to each of the other directors, engagement and communication is key. Some particular point of note you should be mindful of. Local Gardaí, still it could be worth a conversation with your, before returning to work, to inform the local Gardaí of your intention to go back to work. This will have happened in a lot of cases already, where people were in carrying out their preparedness and safety duties in any advance of a remobilisation. Local residents to be mindful of, there is going to be questions. People will be watching what's happening in the next number of weeks. I think a notification to clearly explain your own position and what you will be doing in the next number of weeks and months will be critical. Look at your insurances, look at your utilities, have the conversations, and be mindful of your supply chains. All key asks that everyone should be looking at. Consider a phased return to activities and resources. This is self-explanatory. You should look and assess your own position. We can't answer what each individual should do, but you should look at your own position. What phase you might be at within a particular position. Will your supply chains enable you to go back to a full restart of work? Your own resources. It could be sensible to look at a slow and steady remobilisation, and indeed a transition period before you return back to full activities, to see where any unknown challenges may arise. And finally, all site and new measures and protocols should be kept fluid and be continually assessed. We will need to monitor this in the coming weeks. Again, we do anticipate a new and additional challenges that may arise when we do get back to work. So I'd encourage people to keep your documents fluid and continually assess on a week-by-week basis, and talk with your direct staff and indirect staff to see what more you can do. Again, the return to work is under the principle and a principle guide there that you should only return to work when it's safe to do so. You should only return to work when the particular measures and protocols have been put in place, and you should only continue to work once those measures can be adhered to and sustained. So I suppose we have responsibility between ourselves and the members and you yourselves. If the work can't be done safely, it shouldn't be done. Again, from the Housing Plan and Development Department, we're happy to provide any assistance we can to all members. My contact details are up there, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end, or indeed at any stage if members want to contact us directly. And our own team is available and has worked tirelessly over the last number of weeks to try and keep members in the best position they possibly can.
Brilliant, James. Thanks very much. And it will be continuously, as everyone is saying, putting information out on a daily basis. And it's just, I think the message coming through that everyone should be hearing is safety first, as ever in the construction industry, safety first. But in terms of any ambiguity or issues around site, it has to be safety as your primary concern. So do you adopt the SOP? So look, I'm going to hand over to Conor O'Connell now, Director in the Southern Region. He's going to give us a view of a number of meetings he's had recently with members in the Southern Region, and give us some advice on preparing to return to work. Conor.
Thanks, Shane. Look, over the last number of weeks, we've had an extensive engagement with members in the region. I think we finished our third series of branch meetings by Zoom this morning. Look, we're getting very good feedback from the members in relation to the issues that are arising. You know, certainly we're in times of uncertainty, and what we're trying to do and attempting to do with the all-member circulars, with the daily feedback, with the Zoom meetings, is to give members that certainty in relation to the issues they're dealing with. We're trying to have a coordinated approach to dealing with the various matters that are arising, whether it's contractual, whether it's housing and planning, whether it's individual employee relations issues or collective industrial relations issues. We're trying to give that comfort to members and trying to provide them with that certainty. But there's no doubt about it, when we do resume activities next week, there are going to be issues that are going to come from us, at us from the blind side. Members are going to experience issues that are unknown at the moment. And the main point we need to get across to everyone, the off-site stuff can be just as important as the on-site stuff and the on-site measures that members are going to be undertaking, but certainly feedback into us so that we can, as an industry, have a coordinated approach to the many, many issues that are going to arise over the next number of weeks and months. So I think I'll leave it there, Shane. I think we've covered all the detail of all the various different areas. So I'll leave it there for members' feedback and queries.
Very good, Conor. Thanks very much. Finally, we'll turn to Justin Malloy, our Director in the Western and Midland region, who again is kind of dealing with members in the region on a daily basis. And hopefully, you know, spreading out the message around safety and getting positive feedback as well on some issues. But there, as everyone is saying, there will be issues, and we're here to help as much as possible. Justin.
My other colleagues there, in particular Conor there, we've had regular Zoom meetings there of the 4 branches in my region there to keep members abreast of what's going on there. And I know from talking to the members, they're all very anxious to get back to work. In fairness to them, they have spent time, you know, in the last couple of days, they're preparing the sites, ensuring everything's ready to return to site, extended their canteens, adjusted their entrance exits, put in additional cleaning stations, etc. They have also agreed their safe return with their clients, which is equally important. So both the client and the contractor are both happy to return to work, ensuring that they're being in compliance with COVID-19 protocols. They've all carried out their SOPs there and have them in place there. And the workers have carried out their CIF C19 induction training program. And as you know there, Shane, like, the construction industry is well used to adapting to safety protocols. It's been in our industry for a long time. It's probably unique to other industries, not to us. And our workers are well used to wearing the PPE. There will be a need, obviously, for extensions of times of projects, and there will be a need for increased costs. But as my colleague said earlier there, you know, a collaborative approach where possible is the ideal situation, because cash flow is going to be critical here. So it's imperative that interim valuations are agreed as soon as possible by both the contractor and the client, and that monies flow and everybody get paid within the supply chain. So that's, you know, hugely important. So collaborative approach here is very important. For the actual members themselves, going back to site, I'd say just check you have all your appropriate insurances in place, that the buildings, you know, you haven't been in it for quite a period of time there. So to ensure that they're in a safe place to go back to work. Again, as was mentioned earlier there, checking on your supply chain and that of your subcontractors is hugely important. And if you find that there are materials, or your subcontractors have materials that they can't access in a short period of time, you might consider using alternatives and agreeing with the client or the architect engineer on a particular project. Again, you're going to have to reevaluate your program, your critical path, reschedule your materials, your labor, your subcontractors and your plant, etc. But I do believe, Shane, that everybody, as I say, within our industry, they have all spent a long time in the lockdown preparing, getting everything in place. In fairness to my colleagues there, they have, you know, great health and safety protocols in place. But at this stage, you're all very anxious and willing to go back to work. And I think all the workers are very, very willing to go back to work. And I think they're all in the position to do so. So without further ado, Shane, I'll pass back to yourself.
No, I think you're reflecting the sentiment all around the industry, Justin, there and amongst the director team here. So yeah, I think the work has been put in, and we should say, whilst we were ahead of everyone else in terms of developing an SOP, standard operating procedure, for safety to get us back on site, that SOP is now very much part of and embedded into the national framework protocol for remobilisation that the government, the unions and ourselves and IBEC and Chambers have all agreed and thrashed out at a national level at meetings which Tom attends. So we're operating within that framework and that context, and it's under that framework that sites are reopening on the 18th with safety as the key criteria by which we decide if sites open, rather than anything else. So there's zero ambiguity. It's safety. That's the key decision. So a couple of questions have come in and we're pushing on. So we'll spend a few minutes, I think, just answering questions. I'll try and group them together. And as you'd imagine, the majority of questions are around implementation of the SOP and particularly around the social distancing. So I might throw that easy question over to Dermot there. What's the view on social distancing, bearing in mind that some companies have adopted these procedures over the last couple of months where they were carrying out essential works as mandated by the government on the 28th of March. Dermot.
Well, thanks so much for that, Shane. Yeah, I mean, nobody is naive enough to think that this is going to be easy. As I said in my piece, I've spoken to a number of contractors who are currently working on essential sites, and they have been operating the SOP. They're finding it difficult, but the feedback from the workers they have on site is very positive. They want to work with them to implement it. So that's a key element. You need to engage with the workers. You need to explain what needs to happen. The philosophy we used in relation to generating the SOP was saving lives, but also saving livelihoods. And I think people understand that. And as I mentioned, and it was discussed this week at our safety committee, the style of implementation of the rules over the first weeks should be based on mentoring and coaching. You need to remind people of the rules and they will forget, but you need to remind them. Hopefully initially it'll be through that mechanism of mentoring and coaching. There obviously are physical things that can be done on site, widening of walkways, etc. And I think we've outlined them within the SOP itself. Challenges such as entry and exit, as I said, they have deemed to be the difficult places where people tend to bunch up. But there are things hopefully now that you're contemplating how you can manage that. And those staggered start times, and indeed maybe adding multiple entry points and exit points to your site is something that you should be considering. So I don't think there's one straight answer to this, Shane. Social distancing is not going away. I contemplate that we're going to be, this is a long-term And this is a long-term problem that we're going to have to address. And we can either address it or we can't. And if we can't address it, we're going to end up being closed down. Shane, hopefully that adds it. That answers the question.
That's a good answer. And in the SOP, there's very clear guidelines on where social distancing of 2 meters isn't possible. There's very clear procedures on how to operate safely. And again, that's based on HSE advice and WHO advice. So we're conforming in our SOP to that. I'm going to keep you going, Dermot, while I have you, because I know you're busy. Temperature checks. The recent national protocol mentioned temperature checks, but you might have a view on people are querying whether they're mandatory or not.
Yeah, very clear. They're not mandatory. It's written very poorly in the national document. It calls for the implementation of temperature checking in accordance with public health guidelines. And the key thing is there are no public health guidelines in relation to temperature checking. Now, that's not to say that it won't happen, and I know it is happening on a number of sites. And generally, it tends to be a client requirement. It's been put in within the national protocol in order to facilitate at some time in the future when it may be contemplated as mandatory. It's also within the duties of the employee to comply or to work with temperature checking if it's introduced. So it's a clear answer, and we've been addressing this all week through our all member circulars. There is no mandatory requirement for temperature checking. Temperature checking brings other problems in that then you have to train people how to operate properly. And there also would be industrial relations issues currently with temperature checking. So the message is clear, it's not mandatory.
Very good, thanks, Dermot. And the one of the, I suppose, conditions around the national return to work protocol is that I think it's phase 3 or 4 before people can return to, we'll say, office work. So it's the condition is, where people can work from home, they should continue to do so. Sean, your Construction 4.0 committee, in the middle of all of this, produced a really excellent document on maintaining productivity levels while people are working from home in the current restrictive period. Any insights from that you want to give to people?
Yeah, so the document was put together by a group of our member companies in the BIM working group, the Built Information Modelling working group. And the first thing it points to, I suppose, is the 3 really helpful guides that they had developed over the last 18 months that help people understand and give people a really, really good glossary on digital working and the type of terminology in terms of the environment, the technology, and the different contractual documents that might exist that they could see a reference to but don't really understand what they are. And the document quite simply was a how-to, but also a beware, so that I suppose as people have been working remotely over the last 6 weeks, perhaps they're trying to collaborate digitally, by sharing information and working together on design development, moving projects forward, whilst maybe physical operations were either at a slower pace with a very reduced workforce on essential sites, or maybe there was no one working physically on site at all. So the big caveat that we put on it really was for people to be very aware of what their responsibilities were and that they understood what agreement that they were working under in terms of digital information, so that they're not actually putting themselves at risk and not actually putting forward design information that they could have a contractual responsibility for. So a pretty good guide, covers software, hardware, the type of technology that people could use to collaborate, and the type of systems from a very, very low level right up to big, full common data environments where people would be sharing all digital information, all design information and all associated project information. And the guide is there, it's free, it's up on our website there for people to download.
Sorry, thanks, Sean, thank you very much. I might throw the question out to probably land on Dermot again, sorry, but we were in discussions at a national level, we were adamant that the HSA, HSE and the health side were involved in remobilization. What's the likely kind of frequency of enforcement that we'll see from the HSA on these SOPs over the coming weeks?
Yeah, HSA initially took the view that this was a public health issue and not really within their area of operations. That's changed, and it's changed in line with the national protocol, and they were one of the authors of the national protocol. But we've had continuous discussions with the Health and Safety Authority. They've reminded us that they're not just there to supervise the construction industry, that they'll be inspecting all industry in this space. But they they are aware of the fact that the industry is very, very public and public facing, and that the public will be watching, and inevitably they're going to get complaints about the industry. But they're not naive either in relation to maybe some of the nature of some of these complaints. But they'll be treating COVID-19 as per any other hazard in relation to their inspections. So I think members can expect inspections from inspectors, and indeed it may be useful for them to, at this point, contact your local inspector. We've invited them to review our standard operating procedure, to take our CIF online induction program, so they know exactly how serious the industry is in relation to a safe return to work. So I don't think we have anything to be concerned about there, Shane.
Very good, Dermot. Thanks very much. And just when you mentioned inspection, I think the greatest inspection is going to come from members of the public. So I'd really encourage members to think about, I suppose, the perception around sites. So hoarding should be considered an opportunity, to externally communicate how seriously we're taking COVID. The green high vis, I think, is a good idea, so people can see COVID compliance officers. Again, to what a lot of directors are saying here, it's engage. So engage with the guards, engage with the community, engage with the HSA. You're entitled to work, but it's just that there will be a fear out there amongst the public, which is perfectly understandable. But just be conscious of the guys traveling to sites and congregating around places at lunchtime. Go above and beyond what you might normally do to marshal that, because once people, the public see congregations of people straight away, that's a no-no. So make the extra effort in the next week or 2 weeks to do that, and it'll pay dividends, I think, in terms of keeping us maintaining work. Look, we're at 1 o'clock now, and I can see numbers are kind of dropping off on the webinar. What I might do is just remind everyone, if you have any other specific questions, fire them at us. The website is there. It's generally covered in the AMCs that we send out, and anyone who isn't a member of the CIF can access all our COVID related information, all the back to work stuff. They can download the resource pack. It's free of charge. We've opened all of this up because we'd recognize that we represent the industry, but there are people in the industry who aren't in our membership, and we want to make the industry as safe as possible. We also wanted to join the CIF. Apologies for the hard sell. So we make no bones about that. We want you in. The more of you that are in the CIF, the stronger the industry is, and the stronger we are representing you. So download the resource pack, get your employees to do the induction, visit the CIF shop window. We've opened up a shop window where dozens of commercial providers of products and services around COVID have started to send us offers for CIF members. So they're all in the shop window. So visit that. They may have a useful, innovative solution for you around PPE or consultancy or technology. So do visit that. What I might do is leave the final word to the Director General, Tom Parlin. He's been working tirelessly to get the national government to accept that we're front and centre in any phase 1 of remobilisation, and we know that there will be discussions, or there are discussions ongoing at the moment in government about phase 1. So Tom, I'll hand over to you to wrap up, and then I'll say goodbye to everybody.
I just dipped into my Pringles there. I had to get one down. It is the case. And I know some of the publications are there showing there are some tensions between the medics amongst themselves. There are tensions between the medics and the politicians as well. and about who's calling the shots and so on. But the government, I think, are very determined to begin the first phase on Monday. The cabinet meeting will make that determination today. I've done everything to say that we're confident that we're ready and that we can do it safely, and that we'll be a good exemplar for other sectors when they go to open up. So there is a big responsibility on us. But at the same time, you know, I think we're in a good position. I think the different issues that have been outlined by the different directors are all very important, and they're quite different in the different sectors. So I just keep my fingers crossed that we'll get a positive announcement this evening, and that we'll make a positive start on Monday, and we'll all put our shoulder to the wheel. Clearly there will be detractors. You know, every time there's a media interview, there's somebody out there saying it's way too soon, it's way too risky, it's way too reckless, it's all of those things. But while we have a health crisis, we're also seriously heading into a financial crisis, and I think the predictions are suggesting there'll be a 30 billion hole in our economy this year, and that's a pretty big challenge for whoever takes over as at the helm of the next minister or ministers of finance. So I believe we can make a major contribution in terms of beginning to fill that hole and to dig ourselves out of that. So the best of luck to everyone. We look forward to being back on Monday and back safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, everybody, thank you. We really appreciate it.